What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. And today I'm here to bring you the Season 1, Episode 4 review of Tron Uprising entitled Blackout. Now, I know is today Saturday? I think today actually is Saturday. Yeah, so over the last week I haven't put out any videos. And that's pretty much due to the fact that I've been lazy, haven't really felt like uploading anything, and I've just generally been kind of tired. But the silver lining is today it looks like you're going to be getting 3 videos from me. You're going to get this episode 4 review, the episode 5 review, and please, I appreciate the fact that people are letting me know that Shaman King Flowers is out, but I've seen the chapter, I've already read it. That review will also be up today. So now, on to this episode review. Honestly, I think this is the best cartoon on TV right now. And I say that because the characterization is spot on. The plot, for the most part, is spot on. And it also has that mature edge to it, I think. It has that sort of dark edge to it. And it's not... There is some comedy in the episodes, but it's more dark humor rather than comedy designed to be just hilarious, haha, funny, or comedy designed to cut out the dramatic tension, like somebody else in the comment section mentioned before. So I really, really like this Tron Uprising series, and the episodes just really keep getting better and better. Although in this episode there was a scene where some things went kind of cliche in terms of the ethics of the show, and it was a little bit contrived, but whatever. It's not quite a mature show yet, even though it has a mature edge to it, so I can kind of forgive that. And also, the title of this episode, Blackout, is sort of a double entendre. It refers to the blackouts in Argon City, as well as the fact that his identity is literally being blacked out by Tesla's propaganda, as we see at the end of this episode. So first, let me talk about Mara and Zed, that sort of subplot. I know I haven't talked about this a lot, and the reason why I was sort of reticent to talk about this was because I didn't feel like it was integral to the main storyline, to the main plot of the story, and so I figured I won't talk about it until it becomes more important. But now I see that there are some very, very interesting developments in terms of this Zed subplot that's going on. And it has to do with the way these 2 separate plot lines, one that involves Zed and one that involves Beck, are now slowly becoming intertwined. And 2 things that this subplot allowed for was one, it allowed for the writers to be able to flesh out Zed's characterization. And the second was it laid the foundation for what now appears to be intertwining plot lines. And at first, I thought that this whole Zed subplot would only make sense if Zed somehow wound up joining Beck. But now I see that it was the opposite for this episode. It looks like Zed is now going to be opposing Beck now that he's teamed up with Paige to create a team to hunt down the renegade. So I thought that was very, very good writing. I really like that because they've been developing this subplot for 2 episodes, and they could have drawn it out longer, but they didn't, and they just got straight to the point of this sort of what now looks like a very interesting plot development, or plot twist, if you will. And I think it's a very interesting plot twist to have Beck on one hand be friends with Zed, but on the other hand, now it looks like they're going to become enemies. So yeah, I can't wait to see how this plays out. So this episode begins with a sort of twist. So I don't know what you call these things, but you know those that they have in the grid where they're like planes shaped like, I don't know what, like an N? I can't really call them planes, but they're devices that the people that Tesla's occupation use to transport people to the games. So we see that, and then we see a shot of Beck donning his Tron persona, obviously he's going to try and save these people from being taken to the games. And this scene was just so cool. I mean, again, I love how cool these episodes look aesthetically. So Beck is trying to save these people, and what he does is he's on the top of a platform, and I think it's over the ocean, and he just jumps off the platform. And he has this stick. I know a lot of you, I don't know what this stick is called, but I know a lot of you will probably recognize it. It's the stick that he uses to reprogram things so that he can use them. But in this situation, he jumps off the platform and he uses this stick to create lines of program. And literally, a plane materializes out of these lines of program. It surrounds him, and then he just starts flying towards this transport thing. And it's so cool. So then he gets up in front of this transport. I don't know what you call it, this transport thing. I'll refer to it like that. And then it dematerializes. The plane that he's in dematerializes. He takes out his disc and he throws it at the window. It shatters, and then he just jumps and dives right into the window. And it was just so cool. But it's a little interesting that this was a plot twist, because we see that Beck is about to get derezzed. Well, actually, he does get derezzed, but then it stops, and we see that this is a simulation for Beck's training. And as far as cold starts go, this is a pretty good cold start. For those of you who don't know, a cold start is when a program just starts right before the opening theme or the opening credits. It just goes right to the story. So after this simulation scene with Beck, we see a scene where Tron and Beck are talking to each other. And this is just some more pretty good psychological development for Beck. We see that his heroism is extremely isolating for him. And we see that, first of all, he has to take on the responsibility to save Argon City. But not only that, he has to do it in such a way that he can't reveal his identity, not even to his friends. And we start to see how his inability, or rather, because of the fact that he's not able to trust his friends as much as he would like to, how this leads to him being sort of isolated. And so he has to deal with the fact that, of course, Beck has always been sort of doubting himself and doubting whether or not he had what it took to become the next Tron. But now we see that he has to deal with that, and on top of that, he's facing extreme isolation. And in my opinion, I would just, if I was in his position, I would only tell people I could absolutely trust. But given the fact that Zed has turned out to not be particularly on the side of the renegade, that becomes very problematic, because of course the big problem is you don't know who you can trust. And so, but on the other hand, if he does decide to trust his friends, it would be very interesting to see how his friends could become the base of operations for this sort of revolutionary movement. Now, the main storyline for this episode basically deals with Beck investigating the cause of major blackouts throughout Argon City. And as we know, every occupation needs resources in order to sustain itself, in every military effort in general, actually. So what Tesla has done, he's created this huge drill, and he's mining for energy in Argon City. The problem is not just the blackouts, although that's problematic. The major problem is that if he continues to drill for this energy, he'll basically blow up Argon City. And so the blackouts will be the least of everybody's problems. And so Beck has to go on this operation where he has to destroy this drill, or else Argon City will be destroyed. And this is somewhat interesting because it lends itself to ideas of guerrilla warfare. Because a major part of guerrilla warfare is obviously destroying supply routes, destroying your opponent's resources, and engaging in just all-out surprise attacks in general. That's what guerrilla warfare is all about. And as a revolutionary, Beck has to, since the revolution hasn't really started up yet, even though Cutler is sort of going and proselytizing about the fact that Tron is back, we see that the only person who's really fighting his occupation is Tron and Beck, and at that, mostly Beck. And so a lot of what's going to happen, I think, going forward is that he's going to continue to engage in this sort of guerrilla warfare against the occupation. So Beck infiltrates the facility, the mining facility, in order to plant a bomb on a drill and blow it up. But he gets found out by Paige, and Paige attempts to stop him, but it's really too late. By the time Paige gets to a position where she figures out what was going on, Beck has already set the bomb, and it's about to detonate. And there was this one scene in here that really confused me, that I really thought was a little bit too cliche, even for a children's, I put that in quotation marks, even for a children's show, was that Paige wanted to go back to try and stop the bomb. And it was very clear, it was supposed to be very clear that she was going to fail and that, you know, she would be killed in the process. And Beck at one point goes back to try and save Paige to stop her from being killed by the explosion of the bomb. Now, my thing was, why didn't he just allow her to be killed? And I know that sounds like I'm a ruthless son of a bitch, which I am. If I was in this position, I just would have let her die. I mean, she's an enemy. She's supporting an occupation that's engaging in the oppression of the citizens of Argon City, that's allowing them to be de-rezzed in these barbaric games. Why doesn't Beck just allow her to be killed? I mean, it would just be so much easier if he just say, okay, bye. Bye. Gonna let you die. I mean, so for me, from an ethical standpoint, I thought that was a little bit shaky in terms of the ethical decision-making of Beck. But also, one thing that I could say that was good for this sort of scene was that we finally get some insight into Paige's characterization and some insight into her motivations for why precisely it is that she's joined Clue and joined Tesla and trying to take over the grid. And one of the things that she said to Beck was that, I'm bringing order to the grid. There has to be order. Without order, there will be nothing but chaos. And I think this sort of reveals something about her, not just her characterization and her motivation, but also it reveals something about her backstory as well. Because characters, I mean, it seems like Paige's intentions are good. It's just that she's wound up on the wrong side of this conflict. She has good intentions, but she's joined up with people who are very clearly evil. And whenever there's, not whenever, but most of the time when there's a situation where characters do bad things for good reasons, they tend to be tragic figures. And this is especially clear in Paige's situation because she just seems so obstinate. So I'm just wondering what happened in her past that would make her so stubborn and so obstinate that she would be so committed to order, even at the expense of, for all intents and purposes, killing innocent people in these barbaric games, as they're called. So I'm just very, very interested to see what Paige's backstory is like. And I hope they give that backstory sooner rather than later. Especially since the main person who Beck is fighting throughout this series looks like it's going to be Paige rather than Tesla. Although Beck will have to face Tesla at some point in the series. And I'm not sure about this yet, but my speculation is that at some point Beck and Paige will probably team up together, although I'm not entirely sure about that. But I think it's a definite possibility. So at the end of this episode, well, after this whole thing is sorted out with Beck blowing up the drill and saving Paige and all of that stuff, At the end of the episode is when we get the real plot twist involving Zed, which is what I alluded to earlier. So Paige seeks out Zed because he's known as a very capable machinist. He can, in fact, in this episode, there was a subplot involving Zed where he was engaged in a motorcycle race, and he designed a motorcycle that was, I think, like 30% faster than anything ever designed. So Paige seeks him out, and she wants him to be part of the team that hunts down the Renegade. And at the end of the episode, it looks like Zed takes her up on that offer. And so it's very, very interesting where we get a situation where Zed seems to be against the Renegade, even though he doesn't know that the Renegade is Beck, who is his friend. See what I'm saying? So I think this is going to be a very, very interesting plot twist going forward. At least I hope it'll be an interesting plot twist going forward. And so my thoughts on Zed at this point is, I think he's just a selfish little prick. That's how Zed comes off to me, just being so selfish. And one of the things that, and one of the reasons why I think this is because of what Zed says in this episode, where he says that, how come every time he tries to make things better, referring to the Renegade, he makes things worse for me? And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this plot develops going forward, with Zed potentially being at odds with Beck. And another thing that happens at the end of this episode was the sort of double meaning of the title I referred to at the beginning of this episode review, which is Blackout, dealing with the blackouts in Argon City, but also with Beck's identity being blacked out. So at the end of this episode, Tesla is spouting more occupation propaganda, and he tells the people of Argon City that the Renegade was responsible for the blackouts and that he was trying to engage in domestic terrorism. And Tesla tries to position himself as the one who's trying to protect Argon City from the Renegade. Again, more fake benevolence. And what's very, very surprising to me about this, although it really shouldn't be, is that the people of Argon City eat this stuff up. They're fooled by this. And I don't know if they really believe it or if they're just in denial about this. And so even though Tesla is occupying their city, he's killing people in these games, they still believe him. And again, this just goes back to the psychology of oppressed people. It's another example of how, by displaying fake benevolence, Tesla can try and get these people to engage in their own denial and thereby become complicit in their own oppression. And if you're interested in reading more about this, there's a book by George Orwell, 1984. Pretty sure you've heard of this, but you can just read about how that sort of happens over a prolonged period of time, where people have been so oppressed that they buy into their own oppression. So again, another pretty good episode of Tron Uprising. So this was your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Peace and have a blessed day.